And the only reason I say launched is because we've had a few residents interested in the past year while I was really looking into this program through other towns and how it worked. And I met with Greenwich and went there. They have a very successful program. But to answer your question, now that we've settled on our fees and we've talked to the park crew about how it will work, we'll put it in our brochure for the spring and summer and start out slowly. I think because in Greenwich it was so successful that it was really backed up, and we have a small crew. So within our policies for the commemorative bench, the installations will only happen from September through March. Mm-hmm. Won't happen during our busy time. So we can take orders, we can get the plaques ready, we can get the benches ordered, but none of the assembly and installation can happen until September through March.
Thanks, Pam.
Can you tell me what happens with the benches when they come to the end of their useful life, yet they have been given in honor or in memory of someone? I know that's been a challenge in the past. How will you handle that? Will the town replace it at the town's expense at that point?
No, the way I see it, and I've talked to many towns about it, is that the resident has an opportunity to renew. If they choose not to, we simply take the plaque off and it will be available for somebody else. And it also will depend on the bench itself, what condition it's in after the 10 years. So if it's in great condition, we'll leave it. The hope is that it'll be popular enough that for the benches that we have around town that need to be replaced, we can replace them without having to budget for them.
Okay. Could we see, I don't think I've seen your bench policy.
Oh, absolutely.
Great. How's it going at Weed Beach for the dogs?
Very well. No complaints.
No complaints?
No complaints. Chip and I have seen each other on numerous occasions. I have not run into any issues or problems, nor has he. Just recently, we did hear that there were a few people walking their dogs on the west side of the beach past the playground. When they were questioned about it, they simply said that they were walking towards their home in Brushy Hill. Okay. So other than that, that's the only thing that I've had any comments about. And I don't think it's heavily used. The times I've been down there, there's been maybe 3 dogs and their owners, and I haven't heard a big influx of people that couldn't fit down there. So it's been very quiet.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks. Anything else for Pam? Okay.
Thank you.
Planning and zoning, Jeremy.
Good morning. Just to follow up on the question earlier, the City View permitting, we're starting with the very simple building permits, which are mechanical, HVAC, simple plumbing permits, with the hope of, as Kate mentioned, phasing in larger permits in the future. So we're hoping to go live possibly next Monday and starting to reach out to certain mechanical contractors and others who would benefit. Some of them aren't local, so for them to come all the way down, drive from, say, Hartford for a simple propane permit is very inefficient for them. And I think they'll be very welcomed. As we've spoken to some folks about it, they said, oh, that would be great. Save us 3 hours of driving.
Oh, thank you.
Other than that, in my report, you'll note the big thing to report here is the approval of the Baywater Corbin project by the Planning and Zoning Commission in November. The next step for Mr. Genovese and his team is to get approval from the state DOT because the project's right on Route 1. He'll be meeting with them next Wednesday, and that could be potentially a three-plus month process. We're hoping it goes a little quicker, and I believe Jamie and I are going up to support the project and talk about possible crosswalk and other improvements which would make sense. But David is optimistic of getting through that aspect fairly quickly.
Jeremy, just a point of clarification. In your report, you talk about the 12 units of affordable housing that will be constructed on East Lane. But just so everybody knows, isn't there a total of 14 units that are required with this development?
Correct. The requirement for the Corbin project is 14 deed-restricted affordable units. 2 of those units will be somewhere in the Corbin block, and the other 12 will be at the end of East Lane as part of 2 buildings of special needs housing.
Great. I really want to compliment the commission for their research and diligence on being able to ultimately get to a place to say yes on that. That's a very unique forward thinking. I think it can be a model for the rest of the state of Connecticut on how to help alleviate the backlog of housing needs for the developmentally disabled. It's
And
terrific.
Having the cottage right in town was very helpful for folks locally to understand what the new buildings are likely to be like.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, anything else for Jeremy? Thank you.
I was just
Sorry.
wondering why is there any news about why ZBA had such little activity this past year?
Well, we did talk about that in the office. We believe it's 2 different aspects. One is there was a court decision a few years ago which reaffirmed the state statutes that said hardships shall be related to the land, ZBA variances shall be granted sparingly, and they really came out, it was a very lengthy decision, and reiterated for zoning boards of appeals that, look, while it might be nice to say, well, boy, the person really could use a hand here, variances should be related to land, granted sparingly, and they overturned a variance in another community. So that word got out to all the zoning boards of appeals throughout the state, and so we're seeing a lot less applications because of that. The other reason is the nature of many of the recent requests. Some of them were better handled as zoning regulation or map amendments. So for example, the Corbin project needed a number of zoning regulation and map amendments. And rather than going to the Zoning Board of Appeals, they went to the Planning and Zoning Commission and got the text changed or the map changed. So that seems to be a more logical place for relief. And so those 2 factors play a big role in